Today's short video for RPG Day 2020, Day 29, has ended the detour. We are now back in the same numerical order as the largest number of respondents. Day 29's prompt is ride. And so, once again, I'm in the car. But if you'll notice, this time it's without car noise, because on this particular ride, there were just too many loud and problematic noises to deal with. So, unfortunately, I have to narrate this one. So come along with me for this Redux ride, and we'll see if we can make something out of today's prompt. Ride, of course, seems like an obvious connection to the ongoing concept that we have been demonstrating and talking about of momentum. Momentum being that motion we want to encourage, both for the players and their characters, through the session in a way that meets and matches the goals that we have set up for play. But when we think about ride, perhaps the most famous connection between ride and role-playing gaming is Burning Wheel's statement of "let it ride." And while I'd love to talk about that particular concept, it's not one that's going to mesh as well with the content on the written blog. Instead, what I'd like to look at is an assessment tool, another assessment tool for the quality of momentum. But this one has multiple purposes. Not only does it show you how well the particular scene is gripping the players, it also helps the players grab even harder onto the quality of the scene, the texture of the scene, the feel of the scene in an in-character sense. This is a tool that helps immersion in character. And how is that possible? Well, we are in motion. We have stated goals. The characters are being described as, having had enough. They're trying to get to the point where they can strike back and take out the villain. They can end the threat. There is a lot of emotion riding on it now. The players want to take out the villain. They want to see their characters enter this conflict, and of course, they likely want to see them come out victorious as well, but they're very focused on this particular avenue. But in real life, we can't just hit a fast forward button or a Q button and skip to the next scene. We can't shorten or remove the intervening time. In role-playing games, of course, we can do that instantly. I can just snap my fingers and we're in the next scene. I don't even have to snap my fingers. And while this seems like it would maintain momentum, and it can, it actually makes it a little harder for maintaining momentum in this in-character stance. So real life presents you with interruptions. It presents you with distractions and tangents. It offers different choices. Like if we were to talk about crossing a river, should we ford the river here, where the route is the shortest, or should we take time, go further along the river till we find a safer spot to ford it? We are not talking about changing direction and not crossing the river. We are talking about deciding where and when to cross the river. And life is full of little choices like that, and having little choices like that helps maintain a sense of reality about the setting, which helps people maintain a grip on their in-character stance. However, this is a very subtle skill. It's one that takes time to develop, and interestingly, it's a two-sided skill in that it's not something that the game master can just do and have it take effect. The game master will need to learn how to do it with subtlety and finesse in a reasonable way, which doesn't bog people down with too many choices too often and too difficult a choice. And that's really where the subtlety lays, is figuring out the precise, simple, and not disruptive decision to point out. And this is something that should already exist in the scene. We should be pointing out a decision or a choice or an option rather than inserting one. But it also requires that the group be aware that this is going to happen, that when these points of decision are pointed out or when they become obvious in play, its purpose is not to direct the group towards some kind of story point, like, oh ho ho, you guys are going this way, but the plot is over here, so I'm trying to redirect you. It's not that happening, right? So the group has to learn not to react that way if they have been programmed to think that story is something that is delivered to them by the game master. And there are lots of groups out there who either thinkingly or unthinkingly believe that. But in this kind of play, story is a retroactive thing. It's being discovered. We understand what the story was when it's over. We might be able to predict where it's going, but the dice, the other players, and just circumstance may make us incorrect in that assumption. So from this position, we are trying to create moments of choice, realistic moments of choice that add a little bit of tension. And when we see how the players react to those little bits of tension, those tiny choices, we can know how gripped they are. We can help them stay in character. And if it turns out that we end up having a discussion, an out-of-character discussion, we know that they weren't very deeply involved in the lives of their character in that particular scene or in that particular moment. And so we can step up the tools and tactics that we're going to use to help them find that position of in-character stance. So, in the written blog, we have the characters basically one step away from the villains. They are going to descend down an elevator and come out to the grand portal, which is summoning beings from the other side that are animating and transforming these vines into giant carnivorous threats to all of humanity, or at least all of humanity that lives in this small, out-of-the-way retirement community where people think it's okay to pay Ghostbusters and pizza. But they're just one step away. And so they're in the midst of in-character banter. It seems like they're enjoying themselves. They're getting excited about bringing on the final scene, and a sound is described to them. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. They hear the sound of breaking glass and crushing metal, and they know that they're within earshot of the parking lot, and they know that the only vehicle in the parking lot is their vehicle, the Ecto van. Have the vines decided to crush the van? Does this cut off their escape? Does this mean that if things go awry, they can't get away? If this means they need to go get help, they can't? Should they do something about it, or should they descend and deal with the threat directly right away? We're not talking about not dealing with the threat, but we are talking about making a decision about how and when. Maybe even they would consider splitting the group. You guys go to the van and make sure it's okay. We'll go deal with the villain, which is preposterous. So this sound, it's just described as a sound. It doesn't turn into a conversation. What are you going to do about the destruction of your van? Or are you going to investigate it? It's not that. It's simply a sound description. Well, what happens after that? What do they do after that? Do they ignore the sound? Do they make some comment about the sound and keep going? Or do they come up with a plan to deal with the sound? This is the kind of subtle interaction we are talking about. It helps the players connect with a real-life experience of their characters. And it helps you, secondarily, assess how deeply that connection has been established. All right, I'm reaching the end of my ride. And so, thanks very much for joining with me this far. We only have 2 more prompts to go, and then RPG A Day 2020 reaches the end of its ride for this year. I hope all of you will go out and find other responses and share them through whatever social media tools appeal to you. And that if there are new and cool responders that you discover in that process, that you make sure to leave a comment or a like or whatever it is so that they know that you were there and that you read it. Okay. Until tomorrow, take care.